Imagine for a moment what the early childhood world would look like without you. Perhaps more child abuse. Perhaps children acting out more. You probably know lots more issues that probably would occur when someone taking care of children are not trained. Raise your hand if you've heard this statement. It is better to build a child than to repair an adult. Wonderful. Okay. Congratulations. Because I think you might be here today because you want to learn how to be more effective as a trainer for early childhood workers in the field. That could be Head Start teachers, preschool teachers, child care providers. You can be a star presenter where your message and you is going to be remembered and used. And that's what STAR means today, not the state registry, but speaking to achieve remembrance. Turn to your neighbor and tell them, I am a star presenter. Go ahead.
I am a star presenter.
Now say, turn to the other neighbor and say, I am a star presenter.
I am a star presenter.
Now stand up and we're going to emphasize each word. Ready? I am a star presenter. Give yourselves a hand. Isn't that what you want to be? Of course you do. That's why you're here. By the time you walk out this door, you're going to take a trunk load of techniques. 4 techniques, 4 tools, 4 keys, 4 keys. Open up that trunk in opening up your presentation. 5 parts to having a content-rich training, and 4 tools for closing your presentation, all so that your speech, your training, and you will be remembered and usable. So here is the big question. Rue is not a question, it actually means street in French.
Oh.
Say the letters individually. Are you, what color is the E?
Red.
Say ready. Yes, are you ready? Before we get into the opening, what did you hear before I started?
Music.
Yes. Energy is everything. Say it with me. Energy is everything. Energy is everything. As people are coming together to congregate, and I have done enough trainings, and I'm sure you have too, where people will saunter in and be late, it's very important to have some music. I choose, and I have found this to be very effective, just like I saw several of you standing up wanting to dance. You are creating energy in the room. And it is a steel drum, and it's a guy out of Portland, and it's called Just for the Flock of Fit, P-H-L-O-C-K. But I also use, this is another piece that you might want to consider. You can get a very small MP3 player if you haven't already gotten one. And this is called an Urge speaker. Compact, very lightweight, and it could give you some music, background music, where you don't have to haul in a heavy CD player. Just so you know, create your energy. Many times, you have probably experienced this also. People are spread out around the room. Have you ever found that when you're speaking? Yes. Ask them to please come forward and be gathered in the front. And tell them, I need your help. It would be more helpful for me if everyone was closer together. If you have the opportunity to take chairs out of the room, do it before you even start your presentation. Again, what's everything? Energy. Energy is everything. So let's go into the opening. The first 30 seconds of what comes out of your mouth is either going to grab your audience or say, why am I here anyway? You've got to make the most of it. So the first thing is you have to come out with a bang. But what does that mean? Your first key, come out with a bang? I've heard many of you do it. I bet you have. A startling statistic, a quotation, a question, or a story. Let's talk about some of those. Raise your hand if you like to open up your trainings with a question. Okay? Who likes to open up with a story? Okay, stories are very powerful. But let's talk about those. Many times you will hear someone open up with a question, but they phrase it in a way that doesn't feel like they're actually talking to you. For instance, if I said to you, how many of you have ever been to a Train the Trainers conference before? Raise your hand. But then what if I were to say to you, have you ever been to a Train the Trainers conference before? Which one felt more personable? The second one. How many of you is not a personable question? So here's the key. You speak to one, but relate to all. You, not how many of you. Then let's talk about the storytelling one. You may have heard this too, because I have heard also a lot of times. I'm going to tell you a story about. Just jump into the story. Just jump in. Dive into the story. You don't have to use those extra words. Grab people's attention right off the bat. Get them involved right off the bat. You can use a poem, you can use, like I said, a startling statistic, someone's quote. What did I use? Do you remember? Well, I had the music to energize bring energy into the room, because energy is everything.
You asked the question about what kind of a difference would it be if you were in that child's life?
Right. Imagine what the early childhood world would be like if we didn't have people like you. I did an imagination. Just imagine. Reflect on that. Did I get you interested in what was going to come next? Hopefully I did. So you came out with a bang. There's a second key that we're going to talk about in opening, is to make a big promise. Tell them what they are going to receive and what the benefit is to them from them listening to you and your message. What was my big promise? Anyone remember? Yes, and you visualized that, didn't you? You visualized it. By the time you walk out of here, you're going to take a trunk load of techniques. Can you imagine that? Any early childhood professional would love to have a trunk load of techniques to add to their garage of piles of boxes filled with early childhood materials. Yes. So there was a big promise. Also, another one is, and a lot of speakers forget this, is to get your audience to nod. Get your audience to nod. Because what you're doing is you are greasing the railroad track for what's going to come next. You are laying those tracks and greasing them up because they are with you. Of course, I used a little prop. Are you ready? But what did that share with you? What did that show you about me as a presenter? Anything? Creativity? Energy? Fun? Enthusiasm. So do you think your people in your audience are going to want to sit and listen to you for the rest of your hour-and-a-half presentation? Most likely.
You coached us through the process of how to read that.
Mhm.
We solved it, so we felt like we learned, solved the puzzle.
Okay.
Accomplished something.
There is one thing now that I forgot, but I'm going to let you know because it is our fourth key. Give a roadmap. In my presentation that I will be giving, and I'll share this with you right now, is to let them know exactly what to expect. They had their trunk load of techniques, but what they're going to expect, and I'm not sure I said this, is that you are going to learn, you're going to take with you those two in the trunk load to learn to open your speech with impact and appeal, and have time to practice, and we're going to share how you might open your speech or training with impact using the tools. We're going to learn 5 parts to a content-rich training. 5 parts. And again, have some time to share how you use it or how I use it in trainings that I have done over the years. And then we'll wrap things up with the 4 tools to closing your speech with impact. There's one thing I left out. Can you guess what it is? At the very end? Questions. Yes, you will have a chance to ask questions, but it will not be at the end of this training. It will be before we do our last section. One thing most, again, trainers, I've been to enough workshops over the years myself, I have watched and heard, is that they'll do 2 things. They'll have everyone say, okay, you got all the information, now any questions? Or can you fill out your questionnaire before and then just hand it out on the, on the table before you go out the door? You lose your impact. You don't want to do that. Okay, so we're going to talk about all those pieces. That is your roadmap. So when you're giving a training, make sure you add that in to your opening introduction. So let's go over what our tools are. We're going to come out with a bang. Okay, we are going to make a big promise. We are going to provide a roadmap, and we are going to get our audience to nod. What did I just do? Recap. Some people call that debrief. Now that's an important thing to do after each section of your training. In our next training with the content-rich parts, you will receive a technique that works better than what we just did. Let's move on to having a content-rich training, seminar, or workshop, because this is where you want to make, excuse me for a minute, a big appeal. Okay. You want to make a big appeal with your content. This is so important because this is where that's going to be, you're going to offer ideas and techniques and tools that are going to really help the people you are training. So I don't want you to forget that. I also have a sound effect. When I have you talking to one another, when you hear this sound, whoop, not that sound, this one, that means time is up. Please get refocused, okay? So I'm just going to give you some little warnings here. And now we're going to get to the point of the training, the parts. The P stands for phrase. P-H-R-A-S-E. P-H-R-A-S-E. Phrase. Anytime you speak, anytime you want to teach anything, you must have a foundational phrase. And the reason why it's foundational is because that's what your story is going to be hanging on. Your technique is going to be hanging on. It should never be more than 10 words long. 10 words long. Now, what I'm going to give you, the parts that we're talking about, can be all intermixed. But this is one of the key ones. Have a phrase. Raise your hand if you have a training phrase that you have used and have found it to be very effective, and share that with us. Yes?
KISS, keep it short and simple.
KISS, keep it short and simple. That's an easy one to remember. Another one? Oh. Yes?
Safety comes first.
Safety comes first. Okay. There's a training that I have done numerous times for early childhood professionals. The title of the training is saying good job a good thing? You may have heard me train on this. I have several foundational phrases with the different stories that I tell. But there's one that I tell about a story of my mother-in-law overhearing two children in her first grade classroom talking about their pictures that they're drawing. Is good? Is it great? Is it good? No, 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 no. Well, Mrs. Mould would say it's good. Oh, yeah, but she always says that. So my foundational phrase I actually put to a rhythm. I have folks snap and clap, snap and clap, and it goes like this. Instead of saying good job, use a specific description. Say it with me. Instead of saying good job, use a specific description. Didn't hear ya. Instead of saying good job, use a specific description. That's a foundational phrase. If you get people to say it, to do it, move through it, they've got it. You've done your job with a big piece. So that's the first part of the A, the parts I meant, the P. Now we're going to move on to the A. Now the A has several pieces to it. The A is your anchor. The anchor of your training. Think of what an anchor looks like. And you've got the two hooks off the side. Now think of hanging things off the anchor. And what you'll hang off of that would be an anecdote or a story. Okay? It could be an acronym. It could be an analogy. And I think I forgot my last one. Oh, an activity, of course. An activity. So this is where, as you want to get through each of your pieces and your points, you can include several of them. During a training, you would have to have perhaps several. You could have all of those within one section. So you can tell a story. You can put it to it, give it an acronym. Do an activity. And then have an analogy. You don't have to have all of those, but you can use all of those to anchor your message. And for each point, because when you give an hour and a half training, actually most STARS training, as you know, are how many hours? 2. They always seem to prepare for 2 hours. In those 2 hours, for each point that you want to make in your training, You're going to have several stories with your foundational phrase. You're going to have several activities because you want to change things up, get them interacting, doing things together. Going back to the saying good job, a good thing, to get my point across, I'll ask everyone to turn to a neighbor and just look at them and say, hey, you look good today. Let's try it. Just turn to a neighbor and say, hey, you look good today. Thank you. Okay, now try it again using a specific description. Yes, okay, and start with, I see you're wearing such and such a color. It really makes your face pop. It's a description. One of the things I will use, and you can use this too, is research. You can use research. And it's amazing some of the statistics that you can come up with that will really hone in your point that you want to make. As an example again, in that same training, I use research, a compilation of research that was done since the 1980s and still continues now about, I'm going to hate to hear this, how not to say good job and its negative effects. After I go through that research training, I will ask the audience, how many times have you told a child or an adult, good job, great job, awesome job, and now that you know the statistics, you are actually diminishing their self-worth and lowering their motivation. Whoa. After doing this same training I'm referring to a couple of weeks ago for Head Start, migrant Head Start staff, I had someone in the audience who was so taken aback by the statistics and the stories that she was, her voice was quivering when she said, so we're not supposed to say good job? Right. We're not. Which takes us right into the R for parts. Reflect. Get your audience to reflect on your material. They have to start coming up with their own ideas of why they will use your techniques or not. So how you do that is during your presentation of your stories, your anecdotes, or your acronym, you ask a question, perhaps before you get started, and I will do that. Who thinks saying good job, great job will enhance a child's self-esteem? I usually have the entire audience raise their hands. The entire audience will raise their hands. Then I'll go into the story of my mother-in-law. Then I'll go into the statistics. And then I'll ask again. So then you have another one during. And then after you've done the tool, which we're going to hear next, the different technique, then you ask another one. So when you can ask a question before, during, and after you have given your information, that's how you get them to reflect and to buy into how they're going to change. And then you could ask them that. Turn to your neighbor and tell them one thing you're going to do differently now that you've heard this information. And let them start coming back, hear the honk, and let them call to you what they're going to do differently. That's your debriefing in a whole different way that tends to be more effective. So it's not you as the trainer telling them, okay, remember this, this, and this. No, they're telling their friends, and then they're telling the entire audience. because all you're doing is having them call it out. You know yourself as a trainer how scary it can be to stand in front of a huge audience. You don't want people in the audience to have to be put in a situation where they're scared to share. But they will share to the person next to them who they've said, hey, you look good today. Or I see you're wearing a color that makes your eyes just sparkle. They've already made a connection. And you're asking them to do something, and you've made a connection with them right from the very beginning when you created that energy and you've asked them some questions to reflect, and nothing's right or wrong. So we have the P and the A and the R, and now the T. The T. And most often that is why people come to your training, for the T, the techniques. That's that trunkload of stuff they're going to take out the door with them. Got to give them the tools on how to do what you're suggesting them to do or change when working with children and adults. I use an acronym. I've done this in several ways. For the early childhood field, I've used the DUCK acronym, the D-U-C-K. So during my time of using my content-rich formula with my phrases and so forth, my activities, stories, or whatever I'm doing, the techniques are in the acronym. The D, describe, using a specific description. U, use feeling words for connecting with children and other adults. C, offering choices. Because one of the things, you heard this happen before, is a lot of people want to be in control and have power. But when someone over-controls, guess what happens? It wasn't working before. Yeah, it didn't work now. It's not working. This usually, it sounds like breaking glass. Relationships fall apart. Give choices. Choices, choices, choices. So, so I've got D, U, C, and then my K is kindling confidence. So I use an acronym to give people in my training the tools for changing the way they talk to children in a way that is more effective. Children trust you. Children want to be with you. And the trainers are coming back asking for more information. Can we practice some more? Can you give us some more tools? Can you give us some more ideas on how we could use these techniques? Techniques and tools, techniques and tools, techniques and tools. Maybe you can guess what the S stands for.
What?
Close. Make the sale. The sale. As a trainer, you're a salesperson. You are trying to sell your ideas. You're trying to let them know what you have done and worked out in the field works. Works. So in your sale, there's got to be an if and a then. If you choose to use the duck techniques, children will connect with you easier. They will listen to you. They'll be excited about learning. They will be happy kids. There'll be less behavioral issues in the classroom. Do you want to use these tools? Yes! As the director of the largest early care and education program in Yakima for 14 years, these techniques were used. And we saw amazing results. And guess what? We started using them in the infant room because the entire center, every room, every age, every teacher, every volunteer, and every parent was trained in this technique. It was our culture. It was our culture. And we saw amazing developments with kids. As a matter of fact, I run into parents every now and then, and I'll hear, so-and-so is in law school. So-and-so is a doctor. He's going to school to finishing up his doctorate. So-and-so is an MD. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I that old? I had an astounding thing happen to me yesterday, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. I was substituting in an elementary school, and I had a break, and I was sitting in the staff lounge, and this lady comes over and sits right across from me and says, I know you. I love those. And she said, I was in your class at WSU. You were in my class at WSU? She goes, yeah, you were the assistant professor, remember? Yeah. My 1 year as assistant professor at WSU. And she goes, yeah, and I remember you lost your eyesight, and I remember all, and I said, that was 37 years ago. And she said, I will never forget. You used to come into class with your guitar, you'd get all of us up and singing and dancing, and then you'd start teaching us. And she goes, I loved your class. It was the best class we've ever had. I was never in Toastmasters then, but I realized I was using these techniques back then and never knew it. And I said, okay, here's the big question. Have you used those techniques? And she said, after 34 years of teaching, I have, and I'll never forget your class. Is that the kind of star presenter you want to be? Yeah. Absolutely. I was blown away. I was speechless. I was like, I've had little kids come up to me and say, I remember you, but never an adult teacher. Parts, yes, scary, parts. So now, turn to a neighbor and tell them which part of the parts formula are you going to begin using to make your training more content-rich, memorable, and usable. When you hear the horn, you'll have to stop. Go.
Yeah.
Let's hear what some of you had to say. Call it out.
Foundational phrase.
Foundational phrase. Use some of those anchors. Yes, a story, an acronym. Anyone else?
Off the cuff, this would be a good workshop for Toastmasters. It's great. Very informative.
Thank you. Jim. Okay. Frank. The sales. If, then. If you do this, then this will happen. Sheila.
I like the idea of how you use acronyms.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of goes along with what we heard, but acronyms.
Okay. Carmen, any?
Yeah, I like acronyms. like the structure.
Okay. Carmen, I'm sorry. Krista, anything specific?
Yeah, I just mentioned the acronyms too.
You like those? By the way, I also give out a little business card with the acronym on it and what it stands for. And when I've done feedback evaluations, almost everyone says that they really appreciated receiving that because it can fit in their wallet, back pocket, and if they need to pull it out to remind themselves, it's right there at their fingertips. Always hand those out. Easy to make, and everyone seems to really enjoy it. Before we close up the final section of this training on closing a speech, are there any questions?
Oh, S is sale.
Sale, correct. And it's an if you do this, then you will receive that. Yes?
I still can't understand why it's bad to say good job.
The research is showing that over a consistent basis, which a lot of people do, it measures certain aspects of development. And it actually has been found to lower motivation. It's usually used after something is done rather than during the process of something being done. It diminishes self-worth because sometimes kids will, well, the story that I share with my mother-in-law is she overhears this little boy saying, look at mine, it's good, it's great. No, it's not, I don't like it. Well, Mrs. Mould would say it's great, and he's, oh yeah, but she always says that. It becomes meaningless. Unless it's followed up with something specific. And I can get you the references. When I do handouts, the references are on the effects of praise and encouragement. And encouragement, on the other hand, I also talk about the definition of praise, which is good, great, awesome. And the definition, number one, is to glorify, okay, to put a value or judgment upon. Do you like to be judged on a regular basis? And then on the other hand, encouragement, when you can use specific descriptions and give choices and so forth. Encouragement, the root word is to give courage, but most of all, to give hope. Raise your hand if you agree with me that all life depends on hope. When you give the sale, I'm going to go back to that, Carmen. If you use these techniques, then, remember I said, then you will have children who, You know what I was giving them? Giving teachers, giving you? Hope. Yes. Yes. You've got to give the people in your audience hope. And that's what the sale does, the if and the then. If I can do this, I've got the tools now, then I can have, these are the results I'll have with my students, with my coworkers, with my spouse, with my family members. It's amazing. I usually hear that after my training. Someone will say, can you come home with me and mentor me as I talk to my husband? I do. I get statements like that all the time. And it's like, I can use this with just about everybody, not just with kids. I said, you got it. Yes. So give them hope during the sales. If, then, if you do, then you'll receive this. Those are the benefits. That's why. Before we wrap up the end with our closing speech, are there any more questions? Yes?
Remember, you say that good job lowers one's self-esteem. They feel patronized hearing that. Yes. And we substitute using something more specific, praise them, don't say good job. That was very well done. It's such a thorough job. You did something like that.
Actually, I give more techniques and tools. Because I'm not doing that training per se, I'm not getting into it. But I usually say start with I see, not I like. Because when you see something, it's non-judgmental. When you say I like, it's a judgmental statement. And then you just describe what you're seeing or you're hearing or what they're doing. As an example, just because I'm going to be training trainers who work with people who work with children, there's always areas in a Head Start classroom or early childhood preschool room where they have the dress-up corner, they'll have the book area, they'll have the block area, they'll have the science area or whatever. Let's say, for instance, the blocks, okay? So instead of going into the block area and saying, hey, what are you doing? What are you making? Whatever it is, it's really good. It could be rephrased to say, I see you are balancing 3 different shaped blocks, one on top of the other, and they're staying up. Whoa. See the difference?
Yeah.
And what it says to the child. You care enough about me to look and focus? Give focused attention to me? Focused attention is one of the greatest needs. And I've said, you may have heard me say this before, Mother Teresa has been quoted as saying, people in this world starve more for attention and affection than they do for bread. Never forget that. That is for everybody, not just for children. And I'll say it again. People in this world starve more for attention and affection than they do for bread. Being specific will give that focused attention. And then when a child knows you care enough to give them your time, attachment and affection will follow. Happens all the time. And that's true for almost everyone, not just a child. Let's wrap things up with our closing. Right before the closing, make sure you do a debrief, which we just did. When I asked you to turn to a neighbor and come up with one thing you're going to focus more on when you give your trainings. And you shared that. That's called a debrief. A lot of people, and it's okay to do that because I already did that with you during the first one. Remember when I did the opening? I said, okay, let's go over the steps. Open with a bang. Give a roadmap. Get them to nod. So I helped facilitate that debriefing. But you can debrief after each section that you're teaching. Okay? So here you have your debrief. You can have your questions, which we did, and then move in to the closing. The one thing, please, please, please do not ever, ever end your training with is, that's all I have. It discounts you as a speaker and a trainer. It discounts you. You want to end with a bang. So if we want to end with a bang, just like we opened with a bang, we can do the same thing. We can end with a story, a quote, a poem. We can end with a bang just like that. But before you do that, there's one thing I said right after the debrief. What did I do or say? With the questions or yeah. Okay. I gave you a signal. I gave you a signal that things are going to wrap up. A lot of times, people in your audience will snooze, they'll doze off, even though they want to stay awake. They will, get the nod. Or they've just said to some people may say, oh, well, I've heard this before, I'm checking out. However, if you have really interesting stories and anecdotes and analogies and your acronyms, they're not going to check out, trust me. If you do that, they're not going to check out. But they will. But if you say to them, if you give them the call, the signal of, okay, now it's time to wrap things up. Use your body language, like you're, okay, wrap up a present. Okay, we're ready to close up the section now. People are going to like, oh, I better stay awake. I think there's probably going to be a debrief. They're going to review everything I missed when I was snoozing. It's true. It's true. It's true. So call. Give them a call signal, a signal that you are going to close. Yes, close with the bang. The question, another reflection question. Okay, a story, a quotation. Oh, the other thing is, I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, is you want to refer sometimes to the opening. Bring yourself back. Have that circular motion. That's kind of a given. I forgot it. So it's, do you want to be that star presenter? Do you want your message to be remembered, to be used, and to benefit the lives of thousands of young children in this country? Yes, you do. Remember, what did you say to me when you stood up? Say it with me. I am a star presenter. The call to action. Make sure you have a call to action at the end. And the call to action is that's a repeat of your sales. If you use these tools, then you will be that star presenter. But let me share with you, some people still don't think, even with these tools, they can be a star presenter. It's their personality. It's sometimes they can't formulate their material like they wish to. But now you have those tools. You have that whole trunk load of techniques you're taking out the door with you. But here's my hope for you. Shoot for the moon. Because if you miss, guess what? You are still among the stars. Go do it. And that is my big appeal.